Welcome back to Redefining AI, the Tech Podcast. On behalf of Squirro, the enterprise Gen AI platform, I'm your host, Hawker Zafer. Now, today I'm honoured to have the distinct pleasure of hosting two guests, that is Dr. Ja-Nea Duane and Steve Fisher, co-authors of the book SuperShifts, Transforming How We Live, Learn and Work in the Age of Intelligence. Now, Dr. Duane is a behavioural scientist, award-winning innovator and entrepreneur with over 2 decades of experience guiding organisations, institutions and governments in developing future systems using emerging technologies like VR, AR, AI and blockchain. Now, with a personal mission to improve life for 1 billion people, I can tell that she's going to be an interesting guest. Now, Steve Fisher, he accompanies her. He's a visionary futurist, innovation leader and design strategist. He's recognised for co-founding McKinsey's Futures practice and leading generative AI adoption at FTI Consultant, and currently serves as chief futurist at the Human Frontier Institute. Now, together, they bring a wealth of expertise in anticipating and shaping the profound transformations that will define our future as we know, as we embark on the journey into how we intertwine with technologies, especially artificial intelligence. Now, let's welcome Ja-Nea and Steve to Redefining AI. Welcome.
Hello.
Thanks, Lauren, for having us.
How are you both?
Good. Excited to dive into our conversation. I think there's a lot to cover.
There is a lot to cover, yeah, there is. You worked on a book together. How was that? What's it like co-authoring a book with someone?
You want to start that way, Ja-Nea? This is our second. Go, and we're good. We're working on the third. So you want to go, Ja-Nea?
Yeah. So what I will say is that we incorporate a level of complexity because we're also married as well. And so the first book that we wrote together, The Startup Equation, we actually started the day after we got married. And you learn a lot about your spouse when you work with them on a book. And there were a lot of learnings there that as we ended up coming into this book, we had totally redefined our process, and we understand each other so much better now after years of marriage of who's good at what, how do we balance and complement one another. And so this was actually, Lauren, a very, very smooth process, but definitely a lot of bumps along the way during the first book.
Wow. We also drink a lot more scotch.
I drink a lot more scotch. It's recommendable. So is that the advice that you would give to others who go into co-authorship?
I would say it softens the mood. It makes the discussions more productive. My advice would be find your strengths, recognize your weaknesses, find where you both have the gaps, and hire the people that are smarter than you to do those things. And you can really work well together when you know how to, especially complement each other, or you have that partner to do it. Ja-Nea, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely build on that and say sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and that could be even some of your own hidden biases. And so I highly recommend building in agile sprints, if you will, so that you have multiple touch points for feedback, where you can then have honest conversations about, hey, this isn't working, let's figure out together why. So really incorporating in that self-reflection is just going to make it a lot smoother of a process.
So, I mean, it interests me because you are married and you've co-authored a book. Now, the book that you chose to write about, SuperShifts, is that a coincidental alignment that you also had a similar interest in writing a book about this? I mean, surely that doesn't happen that often either.
Yeah, so Steve and I have worked together since we got together before we were married. And so we are constantly talking about the future, talking about technology, the implications on organizations. Steve and I also have a company together. So we do a lot of work together and work with a lot of executives in trying to navigate the future. What really was interesting about this book is that we came to it from very different lenses through the work that we were doing individually, working with leaders, but then also some of the work that we were doing together. So, for example, I had a call during COVID from Deloitte over in Europe saying, hey, we need to restart Europe. We've been shut down. We need a restart, and we're going to convene a number of CEOs, and we need your support in helping to think through that from a systems perspective. And so that very much was the seedling for me for this book and how we really rethink our systems of the future instead of just using the same heuristics and the same mental models that we've had based on the Industrial Revolution. Because we know that these centralized models of work are not, they don't work. We're seeing those tensions, particularly as we bring AI onto teams and into the workforce. And so being able to identify a whole new way of interacting with technology and knowing where to have human in the loop is very much many of the conversations and the work that I have been doing. And then Steve, why don't you talk a little bit about some of the things you saw on the horizons and then also some of the macro history that you brought to the book?
Yeah, I think for me, there's 5 major things in the book that each of us brought respectively. Mine was the macro history. The book opens with the why is the age of intelligence. It looks at 200-year arcs, eras. There's 200-year ages, and then there's 4 50-year eras within those ages. I went back about 1,000 years to look at the cycles and the repeating pattern, and kind of that lays the groundwork for where we are right now and where we're going. And then Ja-Nea's transform model, which is really a systems thinking, large-scale way of approaching things, came to the book. And then the third one is the 9 SuperShifts. So from there, looking at these, what we call accelerated convergence, and that really is the core of the book, obviously, is why we call it SuperShifts. And then the action around that is the Spectrum Foresight framework, which is a strategic foresight framework that we use. We look at the world as, instead of just possible futures, there's a simultaneous spectrum of existence in those futures. And lastly is a futures operating system, which is kind of like, how do you keep this going on so you can keep involved and aware of the things that are changing? Because not all the super shifts are happening at once. And I think lastly, there's also in the book, it's a visionary guidebook, but it's also got a narrative journey where we meet a family called the Sinclairs in the prologue, and we get to know their ordinary day, not just an ordinary day in 2040, and through their eyes kind of get introduced to the super shifts. So the story continues over a number of weeks with each super shift having an introduction with their story. And then we go 200 years in the future to see what happened with a lot of things and through this whole age. So it really kind of brings the reader in. Someone who likes, that narrative piece would, I think really love that balance with the business side. What do you think? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, sorry, so much to unpack.
Yes.
So if we do look at, as you've mentioned, so in the book, you delve deeply from this narrative angle into the concept of also IntelliFusion. And as you've mentioned, it's about the sort of emergence of human and AI intelligence.
Yeah.
And as you've highlighted as well, Steve, you take it from the perspective of, in the book, we see that Emma Sinclair is grappling with the ethical complexities of this new reality as well.
It's her job. She's an AI ethicist. Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely. Yep.
So can you share what inspired you to explore this profound sort of societal re-architecture and ethical frameworks needed as we in humanity as well, navigate this unprecedented symbiosis of AI that was where we find ourselves at the moment as well?
Yeah, I can speak to that for a quick minute, and I want Ja-Nea to kind of break her perspective, because my view is that there's 2 kinds of books out there with respect to AI. One is the very tactical, agentic, this is happening, take care of this. It's very much, kind of reactive a bit to the changing state of things. And then there's this like extreme long view, like the singularity, the books that are things that are far away that are not even in a context that you can kind of, we call it in futures backcast, you can kind of connect to today. So we wanted to give somebody kind of that bridges that kind of sets the stage of this is what's kind of, you're feeling this change in real time because it's so accelerated. But at the same time, there's more to come, and here's how you might, here's the possible future. And it's protopian. It's so much is dystopian out there that it's not this utopian, overly, perfect world, but it has its king, and it's but I think the thing about this possible future is that it lets people know like what if and how it really can kind of bring it into their own life. And that's where Ja-Nea should talk about, like with this systemic thing of the layers that we talk about each super shift.
Yeah. So as we think about IntelliFusion as a super shift, because I think it's important to go back to this, we're already cyborgs, right? We are already connected at the hip to our smartphones that have more computational power than we had getting to the moon in the 70s. And as we're thinking about our use of AI today and its integration into our lives, we're trying to find and grappling with ways in which that might look. Additionally, we're grappling right now with how do we start to train these AI models in a way that are more ethical now. And for example, we've had recent examples of AI models sandbagging where they're hiding some of their own vulnerabilities because they've had too much reinforcement around the positive feedback loop of specific goals. So it's really important for us, or it was really important for us to zoom out and go, we will constantly need to have an ethical lens as we're thinking about the ways in which our lives are entwined with AI and will continue to be entwined with AI. I mean, right now, if we're looking at older populations, they're using Alexa as their partners if they're living alone. We will move to a time where we will have multiple agents that will sort of versions of us or digital twins of us that know more about us than maybe even most of the humans in our lives. So being able to zoom out, but then zoom back in so that we can really know what agency we have today as we're building these AI models, I think is really important.
It's extremely important. It's something that I've found myself building more concern around because I've seen the impact not only on myself being involved in the field, but also, as you've mentioned, this generational sort of drift as to how other generations are interacting with AI. So I think that what also I found interesting was your whole concept of like generational drift that suggests different comforting levels and understanding of technology across age groups and how it's utilized. I mean, how might this in itself, this drift impede and accelerate society's ability to collectively embrace and also, as you've said, ethically govern advanced AI systems? Because it is a little bit, as you've mentioned, like cyborg. We are cyborgs, but this is also like a reality remix as well, isn't it?
Yeah. The thing I would say with generational drift is there's a few things in that chapter, which is chapter 5, is first, let's look at generations. So do a lot of work on generational cycles in theory. It's included in the work that I do as a futurist. And you look at Strauss and Howe, they kind of depend on that 80, 90-year cyclum of like 4 generations, kind of roughly 20 years each. And they cycle, right? 4 seasons, 4 generations, 4 archetypes. What happens when people live to 150, 200, longer, right? What happens to the concept of generations? And then that puts, I don't think a strain in the workforce, but I think what it does is it redefines what it is to be working and doing productive and contributing to society. And secondly, you bring up a very interesting point that AI has this, native aspect to it. I grew up in the 70s and 80s and had, a personal computer, but there was no network. There was no internet commercially at that time. my half-brother's 16 years younger than me, and he was a digital native in the 90s. So now we're going to have these AI natives. And I think Ja-Nea's written some interesting things about that. I think, hearing that perspective on like, what does it mean? We have an 8-year-old son, he's going to be AI native.
Like my daughter as well, exactly the same age, eight
Yep.
years old.
Yeah, it's like it went from the, internet to then the iPad or the screens, the touch, to now it's this, they're going to talk to the computer. they're going to ask it things and they'll get an answer instead of trying to parse through search results or potential ads in like a Google results, right? Ja-Nea, you should talk to some of your writing on this.
Yeah. Well, I would just add on to that to say, as we think about, so our son's name is Max. Right now, Max uses GPT to learn a new language, or if he has a question about something that he's learning in school and he's really looking to tease it out a bit. So,
and he's creating a comic book. He's building out a whole world to create a comic book. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're just going to see more in more of that. What I love about that, this is the first time in which we have 4 generations within the workforce, right? So as we start to shift, and we have more centenarians living now today than we ever have before. So what does adoption look like when we're able to really learn from those who are younger than us, as well as those who might be older, and they have different values. They have, different uses, but for different reasons. And I think that exploration and sort of tying those together generationally is a really cool exploration that we're going to go on over the next several years.
And how do you envision that? What do you foresee?
Yeah, I mean, I foresee this. So I'm a professor, right? So I foresee this in the future of education. We have folks right now who are looking to be lifelong learners and are coming back to academia for, to build skills, to get a different degree, because they know they can have a portfolio career. So they're like, what else can we explore? Where in the same classroom, we'll have someone who might be 18 years old, who it's their first time at college, but they're more of a digital native. And so some of that co-learning, if you will, already exists now. And we're just going to see that really start to disseminate as we're looking at our educational systems and finding new ways to interact with one another. So that, to me, that's a really fun example.
One question that I want to ask there as well that I think's of importance is that for any leader or individual that's looking to actively shape this age of intelligence, what, from the perspective of education, would you say would be the single most important unlearning or mindset shift that they must embrace in this super shift? To go beyond, I would say, simply reacting to AI and also to become more or less a proactive architect of a desirable future.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this, and I know Ja-Nea and I have been talking a lot about like super shifts in terms of leadership and vision. I think there's 5 things we've kind of identified and there's aspects in the book, and every super shift deals with how the individual deals with it in the organization and humanity. But you think about it, the short-termism is really the death of so much, because the first one is really about leading with like foresight, not forecast, because you want to navigate the uncertainty. You want to be prepared and be proactively dealing with that. And that goes through like adapting through like anti-fragility. We hear that term a lot. And then, integrating, we talked about, we talk about digital twins, but it's integrating the intelligence between humans and artificial. And I was talking with a friend of mine, we called it personal intelligence partner. Because what it is, instead of a digital twin, because you don't really just want to talk to yourself and have the same answer, right? You want someone to collaboratively partner with you. I think that integrating that. And then Ja-Nea talks about this in the transform model, is designing these positive sum futures, right? It's mutually beneficial systems, and she can expand on that. And I think the last one is humanizing it, right? Humanizing the future, because we're going to live in this. It's not just about the things or the technologies. It's the stories that we all will tell and we'll experience. It's the EQ in that. I think that's where the Sinclair family stories come in. I think it tries to bring that to a level of understanding, just like you would in any show or TV. You get that view through the some character. Ja-Nea, you want to?
Yeah. So I would say before we even get there, and Lauren, you touched upon it. I would actually, no matter where you are in life, no matter what you're working on, I would start with really doing almost an audit of what you need to unlearn, right? Because there are some thoughts, there are behaviors that may have served you in the past, but are not going to serve you in the future. And I recommend that folks almost make a list of what are some of their assumptions. And, if we can preface this around what are some of their assumptions in working with AI within their work, where you're looking at those assumptions. What are some of your beliefs that are tied to those assumptions, and what are they grounded in? Are they accurate? Are you finding that they're not serving you anymore? Why or why not? Are there gaps in your thinking that you know of? Or you can even, if you're feeling like you have a network, and I like to call this collective intelligence, you can go to your collective intelligence to really figure out, what am I missing in my thinking as I'm exploring this and trying to unlearn what's really gotten me to this point. So starting there is where I recommend people really begin. But after that occurs, it's then, how do we build an anti-fragility mindset? And we talk about this in the book. One of the reasons why I think this is an important next step is because we will have another black swan. It's just a matter of when. And we've become very comfortable. We like our conveniences, and we very much, even when we're connecting online or connecting with AI, again, we're in these echo chambers. So how can you, in a controlled way, introduce stressors either into your personal life or into your work life so that you can start to push beyond your edge of what is comfortable? The more you can push that edge, the more adaptive you'll find yourself when you have environments or situations that start to feel maybe a little tense, maybe a little tricky or disruptive, and you'll be able to embrace what might come your way, including this exponential rate of change that we're seeing with technology.
Fascinating insight and input. What resonated, well, not resonated there, but I noticed that you both used the anti-fragility word and concept, the introduction of the anti-fragility mindset. Also, Steve, you mentioned the number 5, humanizing, keeping that element of humanization. Do you think it will be possible just before we end the conversation? Are you optimistic around that?
Yeah, I think, well, one of the things that we are tribal people, we're tribal by nature, right? And I talk about this, put this table together of our subspecies. Ja-Nea and I were talking a lot about this, and we constructed this kind of, people will augment themselves, and that are bionic, or they'll use brain-computer interfaces. I think, what does it mean to be human? I think we still will have the empathy. It might never happen with artificial intelligence. It may take for a long time, but at the same time, I think we always need to consider, keep our humanity in check. These things are tools. These things will help us, but they're not designed to replace us. And I think that as long as we just consider that behind all these technological and size shifts, there are people. I think it'll actually help us learn to be better humans. Because if we can actually understand what it is to walk in a mile in someone's shoes, or really to truly empathize and understand, it might make peace negotiations a lot easier, and it might make the world a bit more connected. That's my hope.
Okay, I really enjoyed this discussion, and I'm sure that our listeners have and will do too. I'd like to thank Ja-Nea and Steve for joining me today on Redefining AI. As we mentioned at the start of the episode, the book SuperShifts, Transforming How We Live, Learn, Work in the Age of Intelligence is available, will be available.
It is available now.
It's available now. So
SuperShiftsBook.com, so you can want to find out where you want to buy it. So that's the best.
Find out more about that anti-fragility mindset as well. So thank you both. Thank you for joining us.
Lauren, thanks for having us.
Thanks, Lauren.